The relay core had been singing to itself for 11 days before I found her. That's what the core does on VET-9 when nobody is running active signal traffic. It cycles through its own diagnostics in a low, continuous hum that you stop hearing after about 72 hours. I'd stopped hearing it. I was behind on the calibration logs and running low on the good coffee and telling myself both of those things were the reason I was in a bad mood. And then I opened the access panel to the maintenance crawlspace to check the conduit seals, and there she was. Small. Silver-limbed, the way Vathisi children are before the pigment settles in adolescence. 4 fingers on each hand, tucked under her chin. Eyes that took up too much of her face, dark, facete, the kind of eyes that catch light from angles that shouldn't have any. She was pressed into the corner where the conduit bends, and she was very still, and she was watching me the way a creature watches something large when it can't decide yet if the large thing has noticed it. I stepped back. I put my hands where she could see them. I said, in the 3 Vathisi words I knew, that I wasn't going to touch her. She didn't move. But she didn't run. I learned later, much later, from the IWC trauma registry, that the colony ship had come down 11 weeks before I arrived. Atmospheric failure on approach to the moon's surface installation. 42 passengers. 6 survivors, all adults, all evacuated to the installation's medical facility before it was sealed. Tessa Lee hadn't made it to the evacuation pod. She'd made it to the relay station's outer maintenance hatch because it was closer and it was open and she was small enough to fit through the crawlspace. She'd been there for 11 weeks. Alone. Surviving on the condensation that collected on the cold side of the conduit and the emergency ration packs the previous crew had left zip-tied to a bracket in the maintenance shaft, the kind that last forever and taste like compressed cardboard, and she'd been eating them and drinking cold water and listening to the relay core sing to itself in the dark. When I put food near the access panel that first evening, real food, a heated container of the grain stew I'd been living on, she didn't take it while I was watching. But it was gone in the morning. I didn't push it. I left the panel open. I went about my work. I talked to her the way you talk to something that needs to understand you're not a threat, not at it, just near it, about small things. The calibration readings. The weather pattern on the gas giant below, which was doing something strange with its banding. The fact that the coffee situation had genuinely improved because I'd found a sealed canister in the supply locker that I'd somehow missed. She moved closer to the panel by the 3rd day. By the 6th, she was sitting in the crawlspace opening, watching me run the morning diagnostics. She never spoke. Not a word, not a sound beyond the quiet of her breathing. The trauma registry would tell me that was common. Vathisi children who survived the colony ship disaster presented with extended selective mutism in 4 of the 6 cases documented. What the registry didn't say, because registries don't say things like this, was what it looked like to sit at the relay console with a small silver child perched at the edge of your peripheral vision, not speaking, but staying. Choosing, every morning, to stay. I was 3 weeks in when the ORIF ship appeared on the long-range scope. I knew what it was before I ran the registration. The silhouette was distinctive. A mid-range salvage hauler with the reinforced docking collar that the recovery companies add when they're planning to strip a station and take it with them. The ORIF Brothers fleet had been contracted to decommission 17 outer ring relay stations over the past fiscal cycle. VET-9 was on the list. I'd known it was on the list when I accepted the posting. My job was to run the final data transfer, log the closure, and be off the station when the ORIF team arrived. I looked at the scope. I looked at Tessa Lee, who had come fully out of the crawlspace that morning for the first time and was sitting against the relay console with her knees pulled up, watching the gas giant through the observation port. I pulled up the ORIF Brothers standard recovery charter on my secondary display and read it carefully for the first time. There was a clause, Clause 7, subsection C, that I'd glossed over when I reviewed the decommission paperwork. It covered the disposition of unclaimed persons found on assets during recovery operations. Under ORIF Charter, in conjunction with the Outring Salvage Accords, unclaimed miners located on decommissioned assets became wards of the contracting company pending identification and family reunion proceedings. The proceedings, in practice, took between 8 and 14 months. In practice, during those months, the miner was housed in the contractor's labour dormitory system. It had a legal name. Everyone who knew what it actually was used a different one. I sat with that for a while. The ORIF ship docked at 0340 station time. 4 crew members. The lead contractor was a heavy-set Grethian male named Oshiva who had the look of someone who had decommissioned a lot of stations and found the work straightforward. He handed me the recovery order, told me I had until 0800 to complete my data transfer, and then looked past me to where Tessely had retreated to the crawlspace opening, which she did whenever strangers entered the main bay. "Vethisi juvenile," he said, not as a question. "We'll process her under Clause 7. "She's not unclaimed," I said. He looked at me. "You're the listed operator of a decommissioned pending asset. You don't have custodial standing." "I haven't filed for custodial standing," I said. "That's different from not having it." He checked his documentation. He told me I had until 0800. After he left, I sat down at the console and I thought about what I had. I had a station that was technically still active. It was listed as decommissioned pending, not decommissioned. The decommission didn't complete until the ORIV team filed their closure report, which they couldn't file until I handed over the operational keys, which I hadn't done. The station was mine until I handed those keys over. An active station with a sole occupant who was the primary caregiver for a minor in her care had the right to file a distress of dependent form under IWC Welfare Code, Section 4, Article 9. A distress of dependent filing froze all asset transfers and recovery operations pending IWC review. IWC review, on the outer ring, took between 6 and 10 weeks. In 6 to 10 weeks, Tessely's family status would either be confirmed, there were surviving adults from the colony ship, one of whom might be a blood relation or a named guardian, or it would not, and we would go from there. But she would not spend 6 to 10 weeks in an ORIV Brothers labour dormitory while the paperwork resolved. I filed the form at 0423. I sent it on 3 separate relay frequencies to make sure at least one copy reached the IWC hub before Oshiva noticed what I was doing and started talking about signal priority. Then I did the one other thing I needed to do. The relay core sang its low hum. I wasn't behind on the calibration logs anymore. I'd caught up in the middle of the night while I was thinking, and the station's active status indicator was green and legitimate and not going anywhere. I cross-checked it twice. I wasn't gaming a technicality. VET-HIS 9 was active. I was its operator. I had a dependent in my care and I had filed the appropriate form and I was going to sit here and wait. I turned my chair around. Tessely was out of the crawlspace. She'd come out while I was working, which she sometimes did when she thought I was absorbed in something and wouldn't notice her movement. She was sitting on the floor between the crawlspace opening and the console, which was the furthest into the main bay she'd ever come. Her large dark eyes were on me. She didn't know what I'd done, or not in any specific sense. She couldn't read the console from where she sat, and she didn't know what an IWC distress form was. But she knew something had happened. The way small things know. I sat down on the floor. I had about 3 hours before Oshiva came back and learned what I'd done, and after that it would be loud and bureaucratic and I would need to be a great deal more formal and patient than I was currently feeling. But right now it was 0431 station time and the relay core was humming and the gas giant was turning its slow bands of amber and rust below the observation port and it was quiet. The floor was cold. I didn't move. After a while, I don't know how long, maybe 10 minutes, maybe more, I felt something against the side of my hand. 4 small fingers, silver, cool as the station air, pressing carefully into my palm. She didn't look at me when she did it. She kept looking at the gas giant. I didn't look at her either. I closed my hand slowly around hers and I kept it there. Oshiva came at 0800 as promised. He was not pleased. He made several calls on his own frequency that I wasn't party to and his expression during those calls suggested they weren't going well. By midday, he had confirmed the IWC filing was valid and the freeze was in effect and there was nothing he could do about it. He left one crew member on station as a formality and took the others back to the hauler to wait. The IWC review came back in 5 weeks. One of the surviving adults from the colony ship was Tessely's maternal uncle. He'd been in the medical facility sedation ward for the first month and had only recently been assessed as fit to receive information about the crash. He filed a formal guardian claim inside 48 hours of learning she was alive. He arrived at VET-HIS 9 on a transit shuttle 7 weeks after I filed the form. He was a quiet man, thin from the medical facility, with the same large dark eyes. He stood in the docking bay doorway and said her name. She looked at me first. That was the thing I was not expecting and that I have thought about since, the way you think about certain small moments when they happen to be the truest thing that occurred in a particular year of your life. She looked at me first, and I nodded, and then she crossed the bay and went to him. She still hadn't spoken. She spoke for the first time 3 months later, according to the follow-up the IWC welfare officer sent me. 1 word, to her uncle, in the early morning. The welfare officer didn't tell me what the word was. Maybe it was his name. Maybe it was something else entirely. The station was formally decommissioned the week after they left. The ORIF team was professional about it, in the end. Oshivar didn't speak to me beyond what was necessary, but he was efficient, and the closure report was accurate. I still have the distress form on file. I keep it the way you keep certain pieces of paper that don't mean anything to anyone else. What it says is bureaucratic and dry: a reference number, a date, a station designation, a description of the dependent party in the neutral language the forms require. What it doesn't say is 11 weeks alone in the dark, surviving on condensation and cardboard rations. What it doesn't say is 4 fingers, cool and careful, pressing into the side of my hand while the gas giant turned below us and the core hummed and we both waited to see what the universe was going to do next. I knew what I was going to do. That part had never been in question.